see if...
Cool. Let's make sure it's up and running.
Let's see. There we are.
Now, of course, I got logged out of my Twitter account. I have to run.
Oh, wait.
Authenticate and do all that bullshit.
Share. It takes just a couple minutes. Sorry. There we go. There you go. All right. So you got that. There we go. What's going on, Desert? All right. I'm ready when you are, man, if you want to hit the jingle, baby.
Can't get into the right Twitter account. Oh, that's a pain in the butt. Yeah, never change your computer.
Okay,
just buy one and just use it forever. Because they make things a pain in the ass. Why is it not giving me the right title?
Yes, showing year in review. That's all right. Having a little technical difficulty, but that's okay.
All good. Except he looks like he froze as well. Oh, we're back.
Am I frozen? We're back.
You were. Not anymore.
Yeah, that's the one difference of like doing this live. We used to just record and then post, but Sub wanted to, it was his idea, and it was a great idea, actually. I wasn't so sure about it at first, but start doing these live on Twitter, when we do them. And it's actually, I think it's pretty awesome to do it this way.
Yeah, right on. I like it.
So this part will go on YouTube, but he trims for the Spotify and the Apple Podcast feed.
Got you. Let me see if that's... Oh, that light might be a little bit better. I can't tell.
Yeah, we have we actually have a few people from Oceania that hang out with us. We have some from the Middle East. We have some from Great Britain. So it's not just NA. We actually have people in other countries too.
Right on.
Are we back?
We are back. We're live, baby.
You guys never left.
No.
Okay, I'm gonna punch the jingle and we'll get going.
Hit it. Welcome everybody to episode 68 of the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast. I am J007tv, joined as always by my co-host Subone KD. But today we have a very special guest, Rick Lagnese from Madfinger Games, and the game they make is Gray Zone Warfare. What's good, fellas?
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
No,
Yeah,
thank you for being here.
So, yeah, welcome to the podcast. This is the segment where we usually kind of chit-chat with each other and check in on how our week's going. Jay, how's your week been?
First day back to work yesterday after being off since the 19th of December. It was relatively low key. Now it's just colder than all get out here. We're supposed to get what is big winter weather for me in Texas, possibly 3 to 5 inches of snow on Thursday. So, looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah, it's frigid here right now.
Yeah.
It's almost unbearable.
Man, shut up.
You got us.
Rick, how's it over where you're at, man?
Yeah, I'm in upstate New York, and it's really cold, man. I have a pellet stove, and we have propane. I'm telling you guys, I'm in the middle of nowhere, so we don't get a lot of town stuff, which actually I like that. Anyway, had a couple weeks off of work, and I have not had that. I have not even taken much of any time off since working on Gray Zone Warfare because we have tons to do. They gave us forced vacation time. Like, you were taking off for the rest of the year because they knew we all needed it. And I can't even tell you how important that is. And now tons and tons of planning, focus groups, collecting all the feedback from Night Ops. Still, we have a big patch coming. So yeah, man, lots of planning this week, and then getting my butt kicked by my kids in Smash Brothers when I can. Play.
Dude, I had we were at my so we were one of our friends' houses the other day for a game. They hosted a game night, and so we after a couple of hours of board games, we switched over to Mario Kart, and really haven't played much time on the new one. So my Mario Kart is actually it's over there, Mario Kart 64. That's my
classic.
That's my game. But they were like, oh, let's play, and man, I was fighting for my life against their 12-year-old because she plays it all the time. I'm like, I don't know where these maps go. None of the little tricks that I used to, that worked on that game work anymore. But it's fundamentally kind of the same game. So it was it was close, but took care of business the way us old hats do.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Rick, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. How did you get started with Madfinger and get involved with Gray Zone Warfare? Tell us how you started in the industry, man.
Oh, in the industry, I was. I've definitely always have been an adventurer and a go-getter. So I remember when I was real young, my family laughed at me, especially my parents, when I said I wanted to work in the gaming industry. And all I knew is that it was like, I thought it'd be cool to like test games out and such. And I'm like, the more I learned about that, to me, that was like just testing games and bugs and coding. I'm like, that sounds boring to me. And I was like, I'm never going to work in the gaming industry. So I actually started going to E3. I won an opportunity to go there, and I'm really going to skip over this story. But I'm just going to get to the point that I would go to E3, meet anybody who I could in the industry, and then I would go every year, contacts, connections, and then finally I got in contact with Warhorse Studios. You guys might be familiar with Kingdom Come Deliverance. So if it's it's really an awesome story-driven open world RPG, very realistic, based on history, and now KCD2 is coming in February. So I actually got a job with them working remotely in the U.S. for a Czech company. They're in Prague, and I worked with them for 3 to 4 years throughout all the DLC and everything. So one Czech company, and now Madfinger Games is a Czech company as well. So I reached out because I've been in the industry for like 8 years now. I've never worked in the tactical FPS space, and I've always wanted to do that. I'm a big kid at heart, and I've some of my favorite games back in the day were Gra 1, Gra 2, even Ghost Recon 2. I even like Future Soldier. A lot of people didn't. I like that game. I loved Wildlands. Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2. You know, I'm not so big on Siege because to me, once it deviates too much, I'm old school. That's just me. I love the old Far Cries when they were more so with Crytek, actually.
Okay.
Instinct's Predator. That's also when I played more. I hardly play now with 5 kids and being married. But anyways, Madfinger Games is also in the Czech Republic. And, you know, they're in Brno, a small city. And, you know, I love the boss. It took like a year. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and I wanted to try this opportunity. So now I've been with them for over a year, and a million and a half units sold later. We're going in the right direction. I love working with people. So I started my career as a U.S. community manager in the gaming industry, and now I'm, PR and comms director. So for Madfinger.
Yeah, now you're stuck on our podcast listening to us old heads. It's funny, Gra 2 is one of those games that I still play it every now and again because my old man and his, boomer friends who spent my entire childhood telling me, you can't spend all your time playing games because games, video games are a waste of time because they're not going to get you anywhere. You can't make money playing video games. Little did he know, back in the days of early Mario, right?
Well, sure.
Little did you know that's not true anymore. But they have a custom Gra 2 server still up and running, and they play about once a week. And managed to get to steal an invite into their system. And they're terrible at it, which is why they enjoy playing together. So I kind of upset their balance. But
okay.
But it's fun. It's a good game. I played that when it came out. Played Gra 1, Rainbow Six. I mean, my first person shooter days go all the way back to Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh yeah, same. Playing a computer in school, we played Wolfenstein 3D right in school.
Yeah, back when you could play on keyboard. It wasn't keyboard and mouse. It was keyboard.
XCOM. Yeah, but that's not a shooter. But yeah, Doom, old school Doom.
Yep. And so it was a different world back then, but it's fun to talk to somebody whose reference goes all the way back, back to those good days.
Good days.
But yeah, no, that's it's fun. So you're probably right, kind of in our wheelhouse of age. So we've had some young guys on here. We had.
I'm 42, man. I got no problem saying that.
Same here. Yep, we're
46.
in that age. He's the old man here. Boomer.
Okay.
Actually,
you look younger than both of us, brother. So, I mean, we're the ones that got the grays.
Oh, I appreciate it.
But it's great to it's great to see that experience brought to the forefront.
I got my start. My first online gaming, like with like Xbox Live, was Ghost Recon 2. Then I played Summit Strike. I loved all of the Clancy games right up until Siege, and I played Siege for like 3 years, but it just got to a point to where it was so far removed from what I felt made like Rainbow Six Vegas. Vegas 1 was better than Vegas 2 in my opinion, but
I agree.
It got so far removed from that. I walked away. I've played Call of Duty basically since 2007. I did skip a couple titles. World at War I didn't play really, other than over at a cousin's house a few times. I did not buy Black Ops 3, and I played Advanced Warfare for maybe a month or two at most, and then I was out on that. But aside from that, it's been pretty regularly Call of Duty, and I've actually was looking. I logged 40.4 hours into your game.
Really? Okay, then, man. You're the man.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's not probably a lot right now,
That's
but
okay.
I mean, I did play it a little bit, and I got a lot of the tasks done and stuff like that. So, yeah, I enjoyed your game for sure.
Right
Yeah.
on.
I jumped in at the same time as he did. I mean, I think he's got a few more. He generally has more hours logged in games than I do. Something. My kids are small. They eat up too much time.
In fairness, he also runs a ranch, is going to school for his MBA, and works a full-time job and does a podcast. So I just have a job where I travel a little bit. My kids are a little bit older, so that's why I play more.
I get it.
But yeah, no, it's one of those things that I enjoyed. Gray Zone came out at a really interesting time. I feel like, especially if you're a Call of Duty main, right? It came out at a really interesting time because Call of Duty was kind of in a rough spot. And so a lot of people were very eager for something else. I think when it launched, it offered something refreshing, and especially for those of us who did enjoy, like, the extraction shooter DMZ mode, and have been teased by Tarkov. But every time I've looked at, I'll be honest, I looked at that and I said, oh, here's an intro to Tarkov. And, I at a previous job that I would be working on my own for hours on end. So I lived in YouTube, and it was great. And I said, oh, let me watch this intro to Tarkov. And the video was damn near 2.5 hours long. And they were like, at the end of the video, they were like, okay, now, once you've mastered everything in this video, we can start getting into the combat. And I'm like, that's 2.5 hours of learning how to heal myself and move around and set up settings. That's not something I'm going to invest my time into. Zero chance.
Especially dad gamers.
I mean, look, I'll invest. I've got 5 days and change, I think, in Black Ops 6 since it came out. So it's not like I don't put time into it. But, it's kind of like, it was just hours and hours and hours of all these different ways, things you have to do to just play the game. And it was like, I was talking to a buddy of mine who I worked with, who actually played the Tarkov. And he was like, yeah, it takes about 100 hours before you can really start like doing anything and having fun in that game. And I'm like, that's an investment I'm not sure I'm willing to make. And so your game came out, Gray Zone came out, and I was like, all right, I like the idea of it. My first open world kind of game of this sort was actually Wing Commander Privateer way back in the day. It was, not quite a first person shooter, but it was the whole idea of you go do what you want, you make money, you upgrade your ship, and so I love this idea. I just don't love spending 100 hours learning how to play it before I can start having fun. Yeah. And so I hopped into this game, and I actually had fun on day one. Walked out of the base, didn't know what I was doing, shot somebody who was trying to poach somebody else, and looted up his gear, stole all his gear, and had a great time. And then, died a lot.
Yep. Just like me, just like most.
We played the game together a couple times, but I have a funny story. Somehow I think we ended up in a PvP side of it, which we weren't trying to. That wasn't the goal for us on that game, but somehow I might have clicked the wrong thing. And so we see these figures out in the street, and we just pop off, right? we kill him, and I guess there's a way to, to come back or something. But the guy was talking to me via chat or text. I can't remember which one, but I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't realize y'all were friendly or whatever. We won't take your stuff. As I'm saying that, my friend is over there looting all their shit, and like we just fucking, dude. I was like, I can't remember if they clipped it in chat or what, but it was just funny as hell because I'm like, I'm not looting any of their stuff because I genuinely felt bad. I didn't want to kill a friendly. Yep. So I don't know if that was, I can't remember if that was the PvE side or PvP, but we team killed, no, basically.
Not nice. Not nice at all. But yeah, it was refreshing to hop into the game because I had such, I didn't have really any expectations of it. And one of my buddies who kind of walked away from Call of Duty, FPS Boomer, he was the one that was really advocating. Boomer.
Yeah, of course, he's the man.
He was advocating for this hard. And so I was like, I'll try it. Right. We were running low on, Call of Duty was struggling at the time, kind of like it is, Warzone's doing it now. And I was like, all right, I need something else to entertain me while, I wait for things to get better. And, this game came out. And so I was running it on a really kind of medium, like kind of mid graphics card. It was the AMD's 6650 XT, which, is okay. It was okay. I was getting like 35, 40 frames. And so, but I was able to run it and had some fun with it. And, as Jay said earlier, we ran some games and I really enjoyed, we got into a firefight with AI trying to complete a mission. And I was like under a bridge. They kept pushing me. Jay was dead twice, still trying to get back to his stuff. And I'm like, and I'm just sitting there vibing and like trying to figure out how healing works and like throwing stuff on myself and like, throwing ammo in my mags and dropping mags by mistake and popping AI as they come around the corner. And eventually, got out of it and felt it. And it was a very different rush than I get when I play Warzone, because Warzone is much more fast paced. Right. And so there's not a lot of time to sit there and like figure out, there's not any time to sit there and figure stuff out. You have to know what to do immediately. And it felt like a very big difference in the two games. And I think, there's definitely mentalities that go into both games, but the refreshingness of being in such being in a firefight like that and being able to, check the menus and actually like, why is my gun clicking when I pull the trigger? It's because I don't have any ammo in any of my mags. And how do I fix that? Right. And being able to solve that undercover. Great experience. And, so, there was just a lot going on in Gray Zone. And so, hopefully, you can shed a little bit of light into kind of like, for anybody who hasn't tried it, kind of the mentality and the goal of like, what is Gray Zone supposed to be? And like, what is, what's your goal with the game and kind of like your design philosophy, I guess is probably the way to put it.
Well, for starters, it's clear that it's a very saturated market, even now with extraction shooters, And there's all sorts of shooters that are coming out, and I think that's actually a pretty darn good thing. I think a lot of companies learn from one another, talk to each other more than you think, and I love that as well, and so we enjoy that. One of the things that, I'll say this, we are the very first open world extraction shooter that focuses heavily on realism, the first ones. So when you go into Gray Zone Warfare, you're not looking at it. It's not time sensitive. It's sandbox. That's huge. When you think of a time limit, especially if you don't have a lot of time or you feel pressured or it's matchmaking or just strictly competitive, you can rule out a niche audience, right? We realize that while we know Gray Zone Warfare is going to expand, we know that a lot more people are going to get their hands on with more updates coming. It's still a niche audience. You have Call of Duty that's very fast paced. You have a lot of younger kids playing. Let's be real. Gray Zone Warfare, you usually get an older audience. So it's a great game for, guys and gals to jump into, that they have this open world. They don't have to worry about, jumping in and getting slaughtered right away. Gray Zone Warfare, you get to go into this open world. There's 3 factions you get to choose from, up to 48 players in the map. It's an MMO type game, right? Because you're jumping in, and it's not like, again, there's not multiple maps. It's one map. It's an open world. It's 42 kilometers squared. It takes place in Southeast Asia, and it's, I'm not saying it's 1-to-1, but it's very, very, very comparable, realistic. People even from Vietnam would say, "Oh my goodness, that looks like my trees, the vegetation stuff." But getting to the point, if you're looking for a slow-paced tactical shooter that focuses on realism, that's open world, we're the game. We're the game. You don't like I was saying before, when you jump in, the gameplay loop that's the most important thing, isn't it? If you think about a game, it's the loop. What's going to get people coming back to play? So we launched on April 30th, and when we did, it didn't take too long, and we had sold 500,000 copies. Now we're at about 1.5 million units sold, including editions. That's not bad since April 30th. That's not bad for a game that's 25 to 30% complete. So we're just in early access. We still have a long ways to go. But right now, getting back to your original question, someone wanting to play Gray Zone Warfare, if especially because your channel, you have a lot of Call of Duty players. If you're looking just to get a different pace, if you're looking to get a little more variety, then this is your chance. Fast paced to slow. Take your time. You have PvE, which is great, because if you guys know, when you're playing the old school Ghost Recon games, man, I always thought about, and how they were one of the first, was it GRA 1 or 2, where like you could have up to like 10,
16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
16 players. Yep. And yeah, the missions weren't that great, but it was co-op. And that's universal. That is a universal truth in gaming. When you can have a lot of people playing together, you're bound to have a good time, especially, when you can kind of choose who you play with. Now, to be fair, in our game, you have up to 16 players per faction. And you can choose 3 other guys or gals to go in your squad. So you have 4 squads of 4 per faction, right? 16 players. But, when you get in a faction, you have people working together, because we have voice over IP. So I think you were mentioning about that, guys helping each other out or talking about gear and interactions. You get a lot of that when you jump right into the game, Yeah. Call of Duty players, the thing is, or those who are going into Gray Zone Warfare, because of the realism, it does take time to get acquainted. You are talking to vendors, accepting tasks before you go out there. You're learning, you got to gear up. So it's like, okay, what attachments do you in the beginning, you can get the ACOG, and you have to have a carrier. So some people get confused because they don't have a carrier attachment on their weapon. You don't just attach the ACOG unless you have a carrier. So those things can be intimidating. And good thing is we have creators and press who've made guides for that stuff, and we're working on more guides for the next update, so we can kind of get people more acclimated. But you go out there and you play it the way you want. You can go do the tasks, discover the landing zones, and the more you guys know, when you discover those landing zones, you get the little bird, and now you can fly to those LZs, and you don't have to worry about being shot down. So it gives you time when you're flying to enjoy the world, the open world. Come on, who didn't love in Wildlands when you're on these choppers and just looking over the world when you're flying? Now,
I love that. Wildlands is a really interesting comparison, because that game, so I actually had a buddy that I would play that game with as a cooperative experience. I think cooperative gaming kind of like took a side road the last couple of years, and we just haven't seen a lot of co-op, experiences out there that are any good. And I've been enjoying, that aspect of Gray Zone, because I like that about Wildlands, is you could just kind of roll around the map and do what you want to do. And if you teamed up with some friends, you could all work together. You could split off and do your own thing.
Yep.
And that was something that, the sequel to Wildlands, what's it called? I forget the name of it. Breakpoint was just, I hated it. It was the game loop just felt bad to me compared to Wildlands. I was expecting like more of a direct sequel, and so this game really does remind me of Wildlands, and I think that's one of the aspects I enjoy about it, is how much how much fun you can have together which, you know, Call of Duty it doesn't exactly do the best at right now, which is fine, you know, because it is a, you know, it's more of a, Warzone specifically is more of a, you know, battle royale, right? It's a different mindset going into it, and so I think so I played yesterday, and one of the things that I ran into is, you know, I of course was just kind of going out to try and, you know, kit up, do a couple of missions, and just kind of like have some fun, you know, vibing out there, and just, you know, I like to kind of go out and wander around the jungle and see how much trouble I can get into, and wandered into the marketplace by mistake, without realizing where I was, and got absolutely into the mud with some with I don't know, a lot of AI guys, and I was getting doing well, and then I just got really overconfident because I had done well up to that point, and ran into a firefight where I just got smoked, and so I go back in, you know, kit back up. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go avoid that place. As I'm flying in on the chopper, all of a sudden I get a message, hey, you know, we're on your body. Are you coming to get your stuff? And I'm like, yeah, might as well.
Bro.
And so another squad had followed me in. I didn't see them there.
Yep.
Saw me get murked, walked in, cleared the place out. There's a boss there. And so they were there to do that. So they did that, wiped the guy out. The guy was like, hey, I don't know if you have, if you were here for the boss, he's already dead. I'm like, no, I'm good. I was just screwing around. And so, but yeah, they just sat there and said, come get your stuff. I got my stuff, got everything back. And they went off on their way. I went off on mine, and it was a really good interaction. I enjoyed I enjoy that sort of interaction in a co-op game. Something you don't run into as much anymore.
Well, here's the thing: if you're playing a game that is just competitive only, you don't get that. You don't have time to do that. So you do get to take your time until you can, and that's why we say every move matters. And the more we add into the game, see, it's a huge map already. So not only do we plan on adding in more environmental like points or points of interest, you know, we plan on expanding upon the game loop. Now we know right now in the gameplay loop, you select your tasks, you gear up, and you get out there, right? And then when you're out there, the deeper you explore, you find more difficult AI, like military AI. The more you get out there to the points like Midnight Sapphire, Tiger Bay, Fort Nerith, you will almost always run into another faction. And then that's when it gets intense, because you can take your time until you hear more gunfire getting close to your neck of the woods. And what's great about this game is most people don't talk in Discord. They talk in the game. You know, when they talk in the game, that's when you can hear when another faction's around the corner, and you have to decide, what are you going to do? Did you find some good high value loot? Did you find like a 3+, you know, weapon or, you know, gear that you don't want to lose? Do you have a lot of cash on you? Do you have to return something to the vendor? So how do you want to react? Do you want to work with them? Because you can work with other PMCs, especially in the PvE mode, but in PvEVP, this is what our goal is so that people can play the damn game the way they want. And so if you want to find players, you can go and find and hunt down players. If you want to do the tasks, you can do the tasks. Now, we are not fully there yet. I would say we're not even close to where we want to be. We have so much to do, and all I can say right now, we've been spending hours about some things that I think will have some surprises in this next update. Some things that when we got some feedback, there's some things that we want to do that we haven't talked about yet. So there you go, guys. There's a little bit of being vague, but that I think people are going to be happy in the direction we're going, and we're still sticking to our vision. But you know, the feedback, I can't, guys. We're in DMs. I have creators who have my phone number. You know, we have our creator relations manager Corey Devildock, who we're talking to these guys all the time. The community, our Jakob, our community lead, constantly. Where, you know, it's one thing to say your feedback means the world to us. It's another to implement it. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
so
I think that's
let
good.
me ask you this. You said something that kind of piqued my interest earlier, and I'm just curious, what goes into the thought process behind doing it this way? So like, your game is not the first game that's come out like in a early access phase. Like, why do studios do that? Like, is there like a specific reason? for doing it that way
Yep.
instead of just releasing a finished product. And I'm not criticizing either way.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, if you so Madfinger Games or smaller companies can't afford to make it to 1.0. Think about the scope of the game you're making, and then how long can you afford to pay your employees without making the dime?
Gotcha.
Early access is a lifeline. You know how many of the games that we talk about that we love, especially PC gamers to this day, that started in early access and wouldn't have been able to do it any other way, right? So if we we said it openly, and I can't even tell you everything that came together when we released. As you guys may be aware, we released at such what we thought even was good timing that and we needed to then, that people think and still don't believe us to this day, and they think we planned it from because of drama and some other reasons, if you know where I'm going with this. We literally had a plan then, and we had to, because we're a family driven studio, and our boss, he wanted to take care of those who've been working hours and hours and overtime and all these things and their families, and that's we have to have an early access, because then you need the funds to make a better game.
So
it's almost like going IPO with a startup.
I did a little bit of research into Madfinger, and I was on your website, and I could see all y'all's photos there. But
yep,
the big three of Madfinger Games. You want to talk about that a little bit?
The big three, like Mara, our co-founder, CEO. He also works on the AI, so he works on AI programming. I mean, this guy is an absolute beast. Thomas, and I still say his name wrong, Slapata, this guy with the audio is insane. Also has history with Viet Cong. I don't know if you've heard of that shooter. He did the audio for Viet Cong. I'm not going to lie here, whether we have Voita, who else do we have up there in the big three? I haven't been to our website in so long.
Well, I've got your team up here, but when they're talking about the big three, what it was referring to is best AAA games, free and basically best AAA games without compromise.
Mobile games, Shadowgun Legends, and
yes, and then free and independent. We choose what we create, and our games are our own. And then fun and chill. We are all gamers that love to party, and the guy's holding a pint of beer, which I love that.
So
and not take things too seriously. So that tells me that culture's a big deal there.
Well, yeah, that's what I was mentioning earlier about family driven as well, and having forced time off, believing that was not a bad thing. I sometimes have a hard time stop working, and I can't tell you how many times they told me, family, oh yeah, just another hour. 4 hours later, even that happened today. But point is, they do emphasize on all those three facets. And the fun factor part is that, you shouldn't be in this industry if you're not having fun too. That's what gaming's about. And one of the things is the fun factor actually has to do with some of us being serious about it too. We're serious about having fun, even as this game Gray Zone Warfare, to where, our boss, Mara has openly just talked about like what it's like to focus on the game that we wanted to make, that why we wanted to be a self-publisher, so we could have that fun and not have to worry about a $1 billion publisher with control telling us what to do. And we want to make the game the way we want it on our terms. It's part of how we have the fun, man, that we're in charge, and then that,
it's interesting because I've worked for startups before, and there's definitely an attitude shift over startups versus larger corporations, right? Where, startups have that flexibility. You have that, the smaller, small family owned companies, for example, you've got the ability to, we had everything. We had an espresso bar, and we had a fridge full of beer in the office, and, all the fun things, right? And that was something that was important for the company, to ensure that, the employees there, they didn't view it as this is my 9 to 5, and it's, my life starts at 5:01, right? It was kind of like a more of a culture of, this is part of my life, and I enjoy what I'm doing here, and that I think is it usually shows in the product, right? And we have folks like you who come on and are super excited to be here. And we've had some of our other guests, Alex over at Warzone Loadout. We have him coming on, next week, and he's been on before. And he, it's his company. He started it, and same thing, right? But you contrast that to like larger companies. I've worked for some of the biggest companies out there, and there is no joy in the company. Nobody is happy to be there, right? They're good at their job. They like, they don't mind their work, but it's like, they're always talking about, what are we going to do on the weekend? What are we going to do on the next vacation? What are we going to do after work? And I think that's a big mindset difference in how companies treat their employees. And I think the care that goes into the product that gets created is evident, right? And I think, for a long time, we've had that problem with Call of Duty, right? Where it's like everybody knows that the store always works in Call of Duty, even if the game doesn't. And you guys don't even have a store, right? Like you don't have any MTX going on, as far as I can tell.
I mean, the thing is that what we talked about, number one, again, we're just, even in development, even if we do in-game cosmetics and such, or microtransactions, we talked and are firm and stand by this, that Mara would like all of those, if that happens, the money to be going towards charities, 100%.
That's great.
Donated.
Wow.
So
I love that.
Yeah. Otherwise, the only way the studio's making the funds is off the sales of the game, and so
which means the game has to be good.
Yeah, and so even with 1.5 million units sold, I mean, what's the first thing that he thinks of with that? One, well, we have a future, of course. Two, he takes care of the families and he gives people the bonuses. I mean, let's just be real here. This is something that we have no problem talking about, because when you do a good job and there are actual incentives to do better, and hey, look, we get rewarded for it, and it helps, because at the end of the day, nobody signs up. Man, if anyone just says they sign up just to have fun, you got problems. You really do. You got to grow up. I did not sign up to Madfinger just to have fun. I can have fun with my family. I did it to make a living. I did it to get paid.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something. I also specifically reached out to them because it's a damn good game. I'm damn proud of who we work for and with. But you have to get paid, and so there's that's the balance, right? It's the balance of we don't screw around when we're getting real close to that update, and you have all the marketing on our end, the marketing team. We are working more hours than we can count. But at the end of the day, it gives us the holidays, the time off, and takes care of us so that we can afford to take off. And it works together. And because of early access and because of that strategy, we have a very long future, and we are able to make the game better and better and optimize it, which, that's the other thing too. It blows my mind when people expect a game to be fully optimized on launch. It's like, listen, if one studio says they're in pre-alpha and another studio says they're in pre-alpha, that does not mean the same thing. If you have 500 people at a studio versus 80, or 1,000 people versus 5, it's not apples to apples. So, it depends on publisher, the backing, the funds, investors. There's a lot that goes into it, right? So when we start from the ground up, which was Graysland Warfare is our very first PC game, there was always that, like, are they going to be able to do this? Are they like the day before? I remember last year, man, it was everybody just couldn't stop talking about the day before. So no matter what game was being made, it was always people were trying to say this is another scam. Hey, guess what? We're still here.
Yeah, that's the one that turned out like they launched. That's when they launched, and it wasn't even like the same game, right? It was like they advertised it as one game, and what they shipped was something totally different.
Yeah, and it was terminated, I think, in less than a week. Something like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm so far beyond that. I just only said that because it was a trendy thing to talk about in the tactical FPS genre, which was an unfortunate trend, but it needed to be, I guess, brought up to the light. Integrity is very important.
I think we're freezing up just a little bit here.
For me?
It's that snowstorm getting to him. That upstate New York snowstorm. But, while we wait for him to snap back, one of the things that this game does really well compared to, other games, other extraction shooters that I think is really interesting that I wasn't super familiar with, the idea or, hadn't experienced it, is the idea of a perpetual world, right? Where hopefully he'll be back in a minute. There's only one map, right? That you load into the game, and it's the same world, right? Like it doesn't start when you load in. You load in and there's people that have been there for an hour playing, and there's people that are, that get on after you, and so there's no, every other game that I've gone into has like a starting point where you load the game and everything starts at that moment, and there's no history to the map you're playing. And I think that's such an interesting idea. And it actually led to one of the problems early on that I ran into was, everything kind of existed simultaneously. And so like helicopters, for example, like to get from point A to point B, or in my case, in one instance, was to get back. If there's a lot of people playing and a lot of people are calling helicopters around, there were only so many choppers. And so you would have to sit there and wait. And so it just creates different problems that other games, don't deal with. And I think that, from when it launched to now, you guys have really handled this very well. So like for instance, I had one where I died, or I didn't die, but I got out of town, and I was beat up. I'm like hemorrhaging, and everything's flashing, and I've got 20 different icons of like, fix this. I'm like throwing meds on myself. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just going to use everything I have, and hopefully that'll stop it. And the chopper was just taking forever, right? And so I eventually just like walked back and somehow stumbled into camp and was able to exit the game before I died. So it worked out, but it was like, that was, to me, very frustrating. But now, the choppers are much more efficient. I didn't have any, the wait time was very reasonable for a game of this sort, where it has to generate the chopper and fly it across the map to you and then and go back. And I think that worked. I think that's a good indication of, a company that cares about the product, because they're working through these issues, right?
Yes.
Versus like, other games, where, they throw these out there and they're kind of like, deal with it, right? This is how we design the game to work.
Yep.
And so that's, a huge positive.
Guys, real quick, am I coming in okay?
Yeah,
okay?
You look good.
Okay, good. Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, it happened, but, the whole idea of like a perpetual world, that was, I mentioned Boomer, got me excited about the game early, and he was, that was one of the things that he talked up quite a bit of, like, the world just doesn't stop, which I think is a really unique way of approaching the game, and something that you just don't see people trying for various reasons. And I think you guys have executed it really well. What do you guys, what goes on, what went on behind the scenes, like, about trying to do that? Like, was that something that came up later, or was that like one of the initial ideas of the game?
Some of these ideas come up before even launch, that you like, we have, okay, this is, everything is laid out. We work on this feature. How long is it going to take? What can we do now? What do we have to save for another update? There's a lot that goes into play. We still have plans to help reduce the LZ wait times even more so. As you can see, when people were first playing, we definitely did have extended wait times. So we've about cut them in half now. We could only do so much in the beginning. So we only had so many spline routes, which is basically routes where it's, on rails, right? And where the LZs can go. And there's only so much you can do. Everyone's like, oh, just add another LZ or add another little bird. Yeah, that's easy. It'll just ruin the frame rate and everything, or the performance. Sure, guys. It's not that simple, but we created a widget so you can see on the left side of the screen where the little birds are going and how much time till they land. Now we have created more routes, and they're quicker routes to get to an LZ. So sometimes you'd see a little bird go like all the way around, and now it's like goes a little bit more, not necessarily exactly direct, right? But it's a faster route. And then the best part is, rather than if you're at an LZ and you're calling, or a chopper, right? Rather than it coming all the way from the fob, it comes from off the map now to the LZ, so closer to you. And what that's done is it's helps reduce the LZ camping, because the more you had to wait at an LZ, people were accusing of LZ camping when they're just simply waiting for the little bird to get out of there, right?
Yeah.
So ripple effects.
I had a funny story. One time I was at the fob, and I think I was Mithras was my faction, and I hopped on the wrong little bird. And I took a 20-minute little bird ride to like the far side of the damn map or whatever. And my buddies are like, where are you going? What are you doing? And I'm like, I guess I hopped on the wrong one. So I legit got up, grabbed a beer, went to the bathroom. This was early on. Like it took that long to get from one side to the other, so to your point about, making it come from off the map and things like that. But it was a funny story. And eventually 30 minutes later, we were able to link back up. But, that's awesome. You guys were able to address that. And, we mentioned earlier, we don't really do like chat a whole lot, but I think this question is kind of relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any plans for controller support coming? Because I know you're M&K right now.
Yeah, M&K now, but we have plans for controller support and console support. So
fantastic.
Controller support will take a little bit more time. A lot of it's give and take at a studio like ours. Like you might go to one studio and you'll see, I don't know, 50 people that just, test the game, QA for quality assurance, right? And then you see our team and it's like one desk, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go. Now we've hired a couple more since then, but that's it. And it's not just quality assurance team. It's, designers, what they're capable of doing, and there's a give and take. So we definitely want to do those things. We definitely want to be on console, but we still have to optimize the game and get it to more where we want to be. There's a lot of challenges with Unreal Engine 5. We need to, make them work and sync harmoniously. That takes time. We need to have, tweak some of the features that are in the game. We need to add content that's more relevant to the gameplay loop, right? So there's a lot of give and take and things that we want to add that we're very excited to eventually first show, then talk about it in the future. But yeah, you have to weigh these things. But I can't wait to get controller support because it's there are people who mod and do certain things now. They use controllers and tweak it to their needs, but we want to be able to integrate that in. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I go back and forth. So I'm playing, like I said, I primarily play Call of Duty, and I play that on controller. But I'm playing Marvel Rivals and Delta Force on mouse and key, and obviously I when I play Gray Zone, I'd be playing on mouse and key as well. And I think though, honestly, in the meantime, even if you're on PC and you're normally a controller player, you can still pick up a Gray Zone pretty fast, I think, on mouse and key. I felt like the controls were not overly complicated. I think building guns is probably more complicated than actually being able to use your mouse and key.
For a fact, because I had never played a shooter on PC ever. Well, that's not true. Back in the day, I tried the first Rainbow Six. I believe it was the first one, and trying to play online, and that was AOL dial-up speed, gentlemen. It was like I was like this, that, how I was moving.
Yeah,
I had glimmers of where I could actually kill someone, and but that I can't with PC, man, and M&K. This is my first game learning to do that. To be honest, for me, so what is more can be intimidating, even to people who've served and put time in, is all the attachments that you do learn over time. But yeah, man, M&K is something you will end up picking up on. For me, though, I don't. Some guys know the tricks and trade of things, and here I am, like I'll hit the wrong key, and that takes me off in the heat of battle. Where I'll crouch by accident, or even worse, go prone when I'm trying to move around quick when there's a lot of tension. But you get the hang of it over time.
Well, it's interesting because mouse and key. So as we talked about at the top of the episode, I mouse and key was kind of how I started. And so I've got 30 years of on and off mouse and keyboard logged in FPS games, and then console FPS kind of from GoldenEye on was kind of more. I played that usually split until probably the Xbox 360 era kind of really took over. But so I've got a good mix of both inputs, and it's interesting that I came across one of these guys. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. This is the Razer Tempest or something, where it's basically like it's a condensed keyboard, but it has a thumbstick, very comparable to
interesting,
very comparable to the left stick on a controller, which is something I picked up for this game because, for me, like I'm at the age where I've done enough stuff where my hands are just not as nimble as they used to be. And I get, I get hand pain from, just doing the mouse and key movement specifically now. And so I picked one of those up, and it has really opened up mouse and key as like an enjoyable thing again, for a game, especially like Gray Zone, where you do have a little more time to sit and kind of like move a little slower, unlike, Call of Duty, right? Where it's all reaction based, very, very quick. This game's a little more slower. It's a little more methodical.
Yes.
And so, but it's still panicky and run and gun when it needs to be, which is a great experience. And so mouse and key is one of those things that, like, it seems intimidating. And if you're not familiar with it, if you're not used to it, it's very difficult to kind of figure out.
Yeah.
And so, the way that the key binds are set up on your game is actually really handy because it pairs well with that, to be honest.
Yeah, keybinds are clutch. I love being able to just quickly talk to someone or open up my TAC map with the key, the quick keys. I also use this. This shows age, man, for my wrist to sit on when I play.
Oh, I have one of those too, man.
Because okay, exact same thing. Because when I'm hours on, talking, typing reports and stuff, man, I can't. I don't even know what to do without this little thing anymore. And I use that when I play, just as what it is for me. So I can't move around as fast as others because, man,
So you're not using your whole arm to aim? How will you ever survive?
I know.
How often are you getting to play, Rick? Like I know you work a lot. How often do you play?
Yeah, great question. So the only way I can make it work is I just simply sacrifice time in the beginning where I normally hang out with the family. So that's tough, because I don't, jump in and just play when I'm working. If people only knew the hours that would go into what we plan on, how we work with who, my job, right? I work with, creators, press, potential collaborations. That is kind of exciting that we have some stuff that we're working on right now. And just one conversation, I remember I probably talked to 150 to 200 creators before the game came out on calls. And some of them 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
Nice.
That's a lot of time, right? Like for me, because I don't like the short, quick calls. I don't like just doing email. I'm old school too. I like talking to people. But so playing the game, I got to 130 tasks before update 0.2, and I couldn't finish in time. So then came the wipe. I was 3 tasks away. So I have put over a couple hundred hours into the game. A lot of it was testing, but a lot of it was like I literally started going in and I was like, I am not playing on our own private servers. I am playing in the game. I want to play. I'm not going to I did play a lot of just PvE because I wanted to try and avoid all that GZW Rick. And then I'm like, no, screw it. I don't care. If people want to run and roll with me, then people started doing that. And people didn't just try and bug me and ask all these questions, which it would have been okay. There was a couple questions asked. They just say, we're happy to play with me. So I love the game myself. I have not been able to play a lot of 0.2, again, that takes a toll a little bit when I do because I'm spending a decent amount of time during the week. And that's why when I do play games right now, so guys, I mean, I used to be up to 2 to 3 in the morning playing games, even in my early years of my marriage. My marriage and my time with kids definitely got better when I just started playing games with the kids. So this for me. That's what I was telling you. I play the Switch and all that with the kids, but on my own time, I don't even hardly play games on my own like I used to. But I'll always be a gamer, man. And I eventually will get into Night Ops, and my goal is to beat it before 0.3 to get all the tasks done this time.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's for me, I play predominantly in the evenings, so that my wife is an early to rise, early to bed. I am a forced early to rise, late to bed, so I'm just perpetually tired in life. But it's like the kids all have reasonable bedtime, so it's like I carve out like usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours a night to
that's not
to
bad.
do what I want, which usually is gaming. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's been it is hard. You get to this age, it's hard to carve that time out. And we've all had conversations on Twitter and offline about just where where that time comes from and how difficult it is. And so I think you're absolutely right. But it's interesting because you hear this mantra beat here and there where devs don't play their own games, and that, I think is something that, I've never spoken to a developer who doesn't want to play their product, but at the same time, it's kind of like, when you spend a lot of time working on the product, it's hard to carve out the time, to play on it, right?
And the other thing is, this is no different than an actor who's in a movie who doesn't want to watch their own movie. Just the truth, because you associate it with work, and then you associate it with other things.
One of the biggest tech companies I worked for them because I was their customer, right? And I was their customer first, and I ran into them at a trade. I worked for a company, a different company at the time, a small startup, and we were pitching to them. And I kind of, it's one of those, the pitch didn't work out, but on the side, I was kind of like, hey, are you guys shopping around? And was able to jump ship at the time. But, I went from being a customer who used the product extensively, to after working there for a few months, it was kind of like, in my, I spend all day working on this. In my free time, it's not what I want to do. So it's like my personal account looked like crap compared to test accounts and other accounts that I was working on. So I think it's good that you are actually putting time in, to the game, for the extent that you are. I mean, I know other people play hours and hours and hours more, but to hear you and hear everybody else that I ever talked to about, how much time they actually spend in the game, even though they don't spend, but also not to have it be the only thing that they do. Right.
Yeah. But like I said, I got so dang close, man. And I always have wanted this type of a game, like an MMO feel. Like I always wanted to have that in Ghost Recon, where the PvE VP, I could in Graw just go after a military base and just keep doing it over and over again with guys and work tactfully and take our time and all that. But to have the threat of other players, man, this is the kind of game I've always wanted. So, this is a game I can actually say I would play it in my own time, my spare time, especially if I had more time. But I do play it, especially 0.1, 0.2, I got to catch up. But I had to do that before too with 0.1. I had to wait a few months because there's still a lot that we're doing. And then when I get a little bit more time, sometimes on my lunch break, I would actually play too. Just so I could play and because you got to know your own game. And honestly, I still feel like there's so much for me to learn. I can tell you there's guys that put in 1,000 hours that could probably say more about every little part of the game than even myself, even though that's all I do is see, here's the thing though, like already while people are still enjoying 0.2, we're planning out 0.3, talking about 0.4. So it's, you know what I'm saying? It's always progressing forward, always moving forward. And I am so excited, guys. I'm so excited for the future. And, you'll see, because we're working on a lot of fun things, man.
Well, I think it says a lot about your studio too, given that this is your first PC game and the success that you've had. I don't really do any mobile gaming, so I'm not overly familiar with really any mobile games, but I did see that y'all had several titles that were mobile games that you had to have had some success with if you were able to take that leap and cross over into this genre. But to your point, and just to kind of reset a little bit, Rick is the head of PR and communications for Madfinger Games. So he is out promoting the game, like he said, dealing with content creators, different partnerships, those kind of things. So I kind of get why you're probably, a little bit behind on some of the seasons and some of the before some of the wipes come. So that's totally understandable, man.
I mean, in terms of, like playing, but, of course, like, the big thing about when you're talking about a game is you got to know your product and you got to believe in it. There's definitely a difference. You will see, this is just a fact of life. People who brag so much about knowledge but apply very little. Wisdom, especially as we get older, we realize wisdom is far more valuable than knowledge. I would rather know now, but in terms of our game, you got to know both. You got to know the game, and then you got to enjoy it, man. You got to enjoy it. And for me, that's why they put me in the PR place, because I love talking about it and I love talking to people. So if you love talking to people and you love your game, you're usually going to go in the PR space somewhere.
So, question for you. So, we're on update 0.2.
Yep.
Right. How long Yeah. Do you have a framework or a time frame of when 0.3 comes out, or is that, because I know people are wanting to know a little bit.
Yeah,
Is
so
that on the roadmap, or is that still kind of a TBD?
well, we do have a roadmap that we have released. We talked about 0.3, where Dark Revelation, 0.4 Elite Operator, and we talked, that we our first update came a little under 7 months, so 6 months plus was our first update that had hit November, right?
Mhm.
So then take 6 to 7 months ish, and you're looking at whether we sometime spring, later spring, early summer, or something. I definitely don't want people speculating. I'm just saying all those things just because, but it's going to be somewhere in there, of course, especially if you're going according to timeline and you're counting the months. And we just have some really fun things we're working on. Weather is kind of special because when you're making it dynamic, it's going to affect the gameplay. You know, one little thing
Right.
is like, think about, is there something that how it can affect the little birds? And I don't want to get into that because that's something I probably shouldn't even be talking about right now. But you know, we although too, like I said, we're considering things. So all I can do is tease right now because what's we want to be able to show some stuff, but we do have a big
Hmm.
patch going backwards. We're even though there's a roadmap, we still have to focus on update 0.2. We actually have a big patch coming for Night Ops, which is going to be great. And it's going to address a lot of things. And we let the community test it and experiment with it, make sure it's good to go before we release it. But yeah, man, in the future, I mean, you're talking 0. We're only going towards 0.3, and we got to get to 1.0, man. So,
That's
lead
great.
operator, you're talking about like skills. So, and the thing is, with the way we want to do it, is like you have to earn it. It's like you get certified. So if you're a sniper and you start taking guys out, 100 meters, 200 meters out or whatever, you can get certified based on how many kills you're getting and that sort of thing. You can be, get a certification as a marksman. So when
That's
people are
cool.
playing, yeah, you get that like label or that badge or however we do it. So people know you're an expert marksman because you freaking earned it.
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
because you chose a class. No disrespect to that. I got no problem with classes. But
Sure.
you have to, this is something I think we're doing that I'm not saying it's like completely new or something, but it makes sense, guys. Like, okay, for example, in Skyrim, right? In Skyrim, I remember this is my first ARPG when you would go and you would sneak and you just sat there and you just went in stealth and all of a sudden you leveled up because you just were there. You just were in stealth mode, so you're automatically increasing it. No,
Hmm.
and by the way, that wasn't bad for that time. They with their branching of skills that inspired other games. Let's be real. But what we
Yeah.
want to do, and I know it's a funny comparison, it just made me think of Skyrim, is you got to earn it. You know, um, so that's something that's going to be very special. And then having capturable outposts, that's going to change the gameplay loop. So we have stuff for 0.3 with it, but in 0.4, and then we'll just talk about it a little bit later down the road.
When it
That'll,
comes up.
yeah,
Well, I think that's really interesting. I like the idea of earning badges because it's something to grind for, right? Like if you want to be an expert marksman, for example, you have to go out and actually start sniping things,
yep,
and I feel like when this game first launched, that was something that people ran into was kind of the you ran out of things to grind for between wipes, right? And that is something that I think Tarkov has the problem of, right? Of where you've finished all the missions. There's literally nothing left to do, right? The only thing left to do is um is go hunt other players or like try and scavenge for slightly better gear than you have, but you've already got all the good, you've got good gear.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that, this, and DMZ was the same way in a lot of ways. Like you could finish missions and then there wasn't anything else to do with the game mode. And I think, from your roadmap and things like that, it gives, it opens a new dimension in the game.
The truth is, right now, there isn't a lot to do once you finish the tasks. What players tend to do is, I mean, it is nice to get the high value loot, so at least you can go there and get make some more cash, buy some gear. Because when the problem with 0.1 is when you uh, finish all the tasks, you would just want to focus on PvP, right? Or some guys will help others complete tasks, and they finish the game. They just want to help. That actually happens a lot too. But when if you're dying and you haven't been playing a lot of PvP or whatever, you're losing cash quick and you're not really finding ways to get that cash back unless you're trying to go to a bunch of loot crates and get the cash that, get some weapons to sell. That's fine. Or breaking, selling the parts piece by piece. But the high value loot is great. But let's be real. There's really a lot more we still need to do with the gameplay loop. And so when people finish it, not a lot to do. Now, the nice thing is to even get through all those tasks, minimum, I guess without using guides, you're going to spend 70 to 80 hours minimum. And most people are spending over 100 hours to finish all the tasks. That's not bad for early access for how, I think we've provided more in early access than most have when they start that way for an open world. Let's put it that way.
Can I ask, so, you mentioned 100 hours to complete the tasks. So from a developer standpoint, obviously you want to sell units, right?
Yep.
But how important is playtime? Like, because I'm starting to see like a big shift in what seems like to me a focus on playtime for like just some of the games that we play, like keeping people on your game and playing. So you create tasks that maybe take longer to grind or whatever. Like, how important is that to a developer as far as that goes?
Yeah, that's a great question. The number one important thing that you need to do when you make a game is you need to have the bones. You need to have the bones. So you need to have people able to see your vision and the potential, right? So what happens is, like, we started off and we had, of course, Steam, you're seeing 80K, 90K concurrent players. And then now, you see between 3 to 4K after this update. And sometimes it would dip on sometimes even less than 1,000 players. The thing is, the reason why, now obviously we want to have more people playing our game, but the reason why we never hit the panic button is because when the whole concept of early access, so many people debate about when you play early access, it says on Steam, this is not a finished product. You're buying into the vision. You're buying into the future because we don't have a future, and like we were saying in the beginning or towards the beginning of the call, until you actually can sell and start early access so you can get funds to make 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and so on. So you're buying more into the vision, the idea. The bonus, the benefit is that, for $34.99, that's the standard, that's the base edition. That is a very fair price for spending hundreds of hours. Or even, heck, who can define what's worth it based on how many hours? But if I spend $35 and I put in, even 40, 50 hours, I feel like I'm getting my money's worth.
That makes the game worth it.
Yeah. If I'm playing a game and I'm not enjoying my time, the most I'll probably put in is 3 to 5 hours. I am not going to keep trying to go. If I don't like it, I won't keep playing it. So that always is a little bit interesting when someone's put in 200 hours and they put don't recommend. Well, then how did you put 200 hours into a game and then you put on Steam you didn't recommend it? This is the state of the gaming because we are so saturated with games. There's no such thing as a drought, and there never will be. We are so saturated with games, so we have so many more ways we compare things now. We have everything at our fingertips that gaming and being critical about games is at an all-time high, and some of that is definitely justified. But some of it is just from a lack of understanding of what even early access is and how studios operate. And that's also on us. We're trying to make ourselves more personal, get out there. You're going to see more streams with more developers, what we're doing, how we operate. I think that's very important. So it's also the studio's job to lay out expectations of early access and to lay those things out. And even though we did that, there was so much hype around Gray Zone Warfare. When you had the Call of Duty guys come over, it was really hard for them to keep wanting to play it because people were trying to have that fulfill some kind of satisfaction that they wanted, and they were definitely not getting it with a game that just is in bare bones to start. So,
sure,
you know what I'm saying? It kind of bounced around.
Let me ask you this:
there, but
are you guys afraid at all of running into like the Star Citizen problem, where you're just in early access forever?
No, and the reason why is because we are determined to not stay in early access forever, and we, the only time will tell. Ultimately, obviously, right? We also are not going to rush it. We're not going to rush to 1.0. We are not going to rush into consoles. We need to get a good finished product before we get into consoles by the time we get to 1.0. But we have some really solid plans that, and I'm not going to even bring any other game, including Star Citizen, into this. But the thing is, what really works well is when you're really listening to the community, you're talking to your community, you're talking to the creators, you're talking to even press, whoever partners, and you're really listening to feedback. If you can do that, I think you can make a product to where, hey, you can go into 1.0, and we are absolutely determined We will be hitting 1.0. We talked about that we could be in early access for 3 to 4 years. It's true, and that can vary. We need to get this game right, so we're not going to be in a rush, but we will get there. Feedback, man. Got to listen to the people who are playing your game.
Well, and
Yeah.
it also helps too. So I noticed one of the things that you guys did early on was, I don't know the terminology right, but like having people like Boomer, that's a community VIP, and someone you guys probably trust
Yes.
feedback from, and he's been out helping to promote your game as well. I mean, he's the one that got both of us to even look at it.
Yeah.
And
well,
so yeah.
I mean, Boomer would have testify to this. One of the things when I talked to the team, I was like, guys, I don't want to just see emails. I want us in DMs. I want us to be talking to creators. I make myself available. Boomer and I have talked plenty of times by DM. I wanted to bring him in as a community leader. Now Jakob, our community lead, works with them. We brought, like, we're doing other ways to get more creators, more the community involved. And when you put all that together, and we just start acting like one of the guys and one of the gals, just to talk and blend in, we are part of the community in a way as well. And when I play the game and I'm just talking to people chilling, they find us very approachable. So
let me ask you. So from my experience, I'm kind of more of the the tech guy. I've been in tech here in Silicon Valley and a lot of different companies, and I've done a lot of this stuff, and I've run my own businesses before. And so I'm a little more familiar about it. But can you talk a little bit about how you guys manage social media? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions that people will talk that nobody pays attention to anything that happens on social media, and talking about things on Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, like it always falls on deaf ears. That's a big complaint, at least in Call of Duty, right? That nobody listens. But at the same time, you can't just sit on a timeline and watch what rolls, because usually what pops up is stuff that's negative or stuff that goes viral because it's problematic. So how do you as much as you're allowed to, right? Like, I don't want to expose deep dark company secrets, but how do you stay on top of it? Do you have software? Do you have an army of gremlins? What
I mean, let's be real here. Like, I go back to the old school thing. So there is, I can't even tell you, I myself, I always think I'll be a community manager at heart. That's how I started in this industry. Like I said, I think prior to the call, when I started with Warhorse, on the call as well, I talked about Warhorse Studios. I was a U.S. community manager. I love the community. And so the way that I show it, or at least no one really sees all the time we put into checking the socials. We have our community manager who runs the socials, or for example, X. I always find it fascinating when people say that X is not going to go anywhere. It's like, come on, guys, you got to be a little smarter than that. Like, you can go on your blue sky, you can do all these other, but guys, come on, you got to think here. You're talking about $1 billion company, $1 billion man, and engagement has actually gone up on X. So I look at that very much so. Discord, we really care about that. We're actually going to be doing more with our channels. We're going to be doing more with partnerships. I'll be honest, I cannot stand. I'm not a fan of like Facebook, but it's necessary because there are people who use Facebook, and the older folks. I say older folks, I really just mean 30, 40, 50-year-olds use it more than the kids, and because we use that's still relevant, for our fans, because we do have an older audience. But it's imperative. I mean, we look and see what people are saying on Steam, and there's times where we chime in. There's times where it's like we wouldn't get any work done if we were always trying to chime in. I can at least tell you, for us, Madfinger, it's pivotal. We track metrics. We see what the majority of people are saying. I cannot tell you how many times I'll take a screenshot of a comment and say, look, here's another comment about Fort Nerith, guys, that we, because we're still working on the AI of Fort Nerith right now. And we take that, and I just, if only people saw all the times we'll spend in critiquing and analyzing and listening. Reddit too, man. Reddit, and sometimes we find that to be quite enjoyable. We'll put a link to a post, guys, please check this out. Here's what they're saying that's good. And then we'll send it to our marketing team. Guys, here's what we need to address with the designers. So it's vital. I love X the most myself personally. I think in the gaming industry, companies that would get the most reach is with X, and of course their own Discord. But that's where it's at. And we're not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere. It's a big deal.
That's great. Yeah, it's one of those things. People that haven't done any kind of social media management, like at a corporate level, it's like I sit on my Twitter, right, and I see kind of how my interactions curate the feed, right, or X, I guess.
Oh, I don't care.
Are we calling it X
Twitter.
now? Are we calling it now?
I'm never calling it X. I like Elon, but no, that was one of the biggest, stupidest things he could have done.
Let's call it Twitter. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, my wife was very curious when the credit card bill started saying X Premium. She's like, "Excuse me." It's a 1X. It's okay. But no, like it's something I'm working on a video series. I haven't done it yet, but I want to kind of unpack some of how corporations kind of monitor their brands and like how their customers react to stuff on social media, because I think it's really interesting how much information is out there, and nobody thinks about it, right? Because it's like I interact with I have like probably about 30 to 50 people that I usually interact with on a weekly basis on Twitter. And so it's like I get their stuff and stuff stuff similar to what they talk about.
Yeah.
A lot more than I get other opinions, right? And especially when it comes to video games and whatnot. And it's kind of like, it's like most of them are older. Most of them, we're not boomers, but we're getting up there. And so it's kind of like it's one perspective, right? And then you see a different perspective will pop up every now and again. It's like that's a completely different take on the same conversation. And like, the software that's out there now that can like sort that out and kind of gather it all up without the biases, without the kind of the internal algorithmic emphasis that the sites want to put on there to drive your engagement, I think is really interesting. And there's a lot to be said for voicing your opinion and making sure that when you see something wrong with the game or you have problems with the game, that you put your opinions out there and you say, hey, look, here's something that's not I don't think is right. I don't think it's a good the game isn't going in the right direction with these changes or with these ideas that they're pushing, or they're just broken.
Yep.
And I think when you do that, like people think they just scream into a void, right? And but how often do you see like smaller accounts like 20, 30, 50 followers versus like the tens of thousands of followers?
You know what, I'm gonna be honest, I see them all. I see a lot of DMs that I honestly don't really ever get to, hardly, and that's because, to be honest, sanity. And what I mean is not so much what they're saying in the DMs. I'm not saying that can't be a part of it. It's time. And it's like, you know what? This goes for anything in life. If you want to have a healthy life, you have to have balance. And I'm still, to this day at 42, I'm still learning a balance of a lot of things. You know what was one of the hardest things for me to do in Madfinger? When I started, it was just a few of us in the marketing team. And now we have a really healthy team. And when we have a healthy marketing team and more people helping, it means more can get done. It's really hard for me to let go. I like to be involved in everything. And that's not always healthy, because then I get less sleep. Then I can get more stressed. And then I can be like, well, I want to try and do everything. So that's about being a control problem. So, seeing more of our team, new guys who've hopped in last year and gals, it's been incredible. And it's, but yeah, we pay attention to all this stuff. So going back to social media is like, I see even the little ones. I see the one guy that always happens to try and piss me off. And I was like, just keep posting. It's fine. He tries. It's like he always wants to slam. He's like, Gray Zone dead. He keeps saying that, Gray Zone dead. Gray Zone dead. It's cool to be negative. Once you understand social media, number one, it's fake. It's not real at all. Whenever you see, people posting and showing pictures and stuff, I can't even tell you how many times you see like families, they brag. Everywhere they go, they brag, and then they then all of a sudden parents are divorced. And all these problems.
Just happened to a friend of mine.
It's like you gotta live in the moment. Week. That's the problem with social media. It's hardly living in the moment. So it's vital to the industry. But to me personally, I'm trying to know when to use it and have more of an importance to help people. And also, yes, I still on my off time will check some Gray Zone Warfare stuff. But a lot of times now, this phone, it stays in the office when I'm hanging out with a family, because social media just realized it's not real. Because
really smart.
If I'll even talk to people. I say, look, if I wasn't working for Madfinger anymore, we probably wouldn't be talking again. And some people don't want to hear that, but I'm like, guys, it's no offense, we're acquaintances, but we probably won't talk much if I work for another company. That's okay. just realize what it is. Don't get attached or cling to don't make your friends on social media because they're not your real friends.
Jay, you're my real friend now.
Well,
because you have my phone number and we talk.
I've met people in person from social media. Forgive me. I think we know what I mean. It doesn't mean it can't be authentic, but it just means that in general, just don't rely on that for your only source. You got to have a life outside of tech. And if you're not, and you're just immersed in this, you are going to find yourself an unhappy life in general.
No, I agree 100%. I think it's a lot of people need to learn that. I'm not gonna say names, but I think some people need to learn that too.
Well, and Sub1's very good at that. He's very good at separating those things, more so better than me. He can disengage and stuff like that. And me personally, I don't have that kind of personality to where if I see some dumb shit, I want to like immediately just pound it. But he's good at walking away, and I'm trying to like learn to be able to do that and just not engage with certain things. But some things I just can't let go. So back to your point about, seeing the same guy every time, you're a much better person than me because I would have probably wanted to destroy that dude after about 100 times.
Well, what happens is I start to look at it a little bit more like comical. Not that I'm laughing at him, but I just find it a lot of times when we get a ton of criticism, number one, I do take it very serious, but sometimes when I take a step back and I laugh, I do it for it's my own psyche. I don't do it in mocking someone. I do it in like, especially when I know they're out to attack and see if they can get a reaction. I do find that a little funny when they're trying to get a reaction. But sometimes when I feel like there's so much to do and there's so much going on, part of my knee-jerk reaction is to laugh a little bit. But when I say I see it all, and I talk about balance, I really do see it all. I do see the DMs that come in, and then what they might not know is I'm like, hey, I'm getting these concerns. We try to get people that support tickets because you can't just expect you're going to DM and get a response. You have to. There are channels. There are people to go to for these things. And it ends up being where it's like you got, again, balance of everything. Balance of your job, when to check the messages, when to respond. And there's times where we will call some stuff out if it's bogus. Like, oh, they released because of Tarkov's drama. Actually, that wasn't true at all. We had already planned for April 25th. We delayed 5 days. So sometimes I will explain that, but it's few and far between. You got to choose wisely when to go in. And otherwise for me, because if I do start to get to rage or something, man, I embarrass myself because I'm not that great of when I go into rage mode. I'm not very reasonable.
Yeah, you don't always solve anything. It's funny because when I was in I was in QA at a tech company for a while, and one of the things that we were doing is we were launching a revision of our sign up page, and in doing that, it was like we rebuilt the sign up page and we kind of rejiggered everything and we changed our tiers and our prices, aka our prices went up, which is never a fun thing to do. But we kind of did all this together so that we could hopefully add more value in certain ways at higher prices and kind of like, encourage people to step up a little bit versus where they were, and in the boardroom, it all makes sense, of course, right? Like, who could argue against this idea? And then, we were supposed to launch on a Tuesday, and on Monday night / Tuesday morning, I ran into a problem where I think it was Monday night I found it, and Tuesday everybody looked at it. We were supposed to go live at like 2:00 or something, and then 9 a.m. Of course, I'm called into a meeting. What the hell is this? And it was a thing where it's like logging into your account would basically charge you your annual renewal every time you logged in. Under certain conditions, not every time, but enough that like under certain conditions you would get every time you click logged in, there's $200, upwards of like $1,000 depending on your account level. Not ideal. And so obviously that ground everything to a halt, right? Marketing had to stop their copy, socials ground to a halt, everything stopped, and we had to fix it. And so because of the financials, and we had to have it out before the end of the quarter or the year end or whatever it was like the end of the week was like the deadline. Like we had to have it out, and it happened to land on Memorial Day or something like, or 4th of July or something like that. It happened to be in that window. And so we got it fixed Friday afternoon, pushed it out, and everybody took off. because it was like, we got it out, we fixed the bug, we saved everybody thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And we come back into a shitstorm on Monday of like, you up raising all of our prices while we're waiting, while we're on a holiday weekend so that the bad press doesn't get you. And it was like, it was the one time that I made the venture into the forums of trying to explain that, no, we tried to save you thousands of dollars from our mistake. And I got fried right out of the forum. I was gone. I deleted my forum account. It was bad.
Oh my goodness. I remember when I used to be so into the Giants and I would be in their forums in the year 2007. No, was it 2007 and 2011? 2007 was when they got crushed their first two games to the Packers and the Cowboys. And then they went on a tear after they beat the Redskins when they were called the Redskins at that time. And they went to the playoffs and Super Bowl. And still in the forums, they were always criticizing the Giants. And I couldn't take it anymore. So forums, it's hard to survive in the forums, man.
I mean, I'd criticize the team too if they lost to the Cowboys, but
yeah.
Hey, we're not ready for football talk because I do have one serious question.
I thought I was helping with a transition for you guys. Okay.
No, well, I promised somebody I would ask you something.
Okay.
Saeed from Twitter wanted to know if you guys have any plans to maybe translate the game into like French or any other language. I know
who he is. That's my boy. I met him at Gamescom.
Yeah, he wanted me to ask. So there you go.
I know everybody. I try. I knew him. Yeah, Francais there. So we are working on localization for this update. So that's kind of a big deal.
Sweet.
But the thing is, I would love to say like what languages, but we're still in the process. So we're not there yet. So I can't even say like what languages, but of course, when you think of localization, you think of, okay, French, Spanish, what we can do in Asia, there's German. I mean, there's a lot to do there. So that is very important. Localization is coming. We're trying to get this done sooner than what we had planned as well. So yes, it is coming to this next update.
Excellent.
I'm going to say this. Look, I'm going to say this to anybody who doesn't think it's a big deal that they're tackling a localization. Like, oh, you just plug it into a translator. Look, Google the phrase "all your base are belong to me," and you will learn exactly why doing this right is so important and what happens if you do it wrong, because it will make or break the game in other regions if you blow it. Right. Which is why I think, if they're pushing it up, especially if you guys are pushing it up from like where you had planned to now and you're getting it out there, like that's a huge effort.
It's important because we're going to start going to more events and we want to go around the globe, man. And so, it's hard to go to another country or, a nationality and then to talk about the game and the first question is usually localization.
And you guys are pretty active. I've been watching your socials for a while. Tell me about these range days, my guy. Do you get to partake?
I'll tell you what. I mean, I've never shot an assault rifle ever. So going to range day was incredible. I mean, because thanks to Corey, also known as Devil Dog Gamer, he got the invitation. I was the +1 to be fair. Now they also knew Gray Zone Warfare was coming, and it's not often a developer goes. So we see all these firearm companies and people, and so many of them heard about the game and some didn't, which was great too. So and the reason why we're going to these like the range days, because not only do we want to get the word out, we want to work with other companies that would love the idea and concept of what we're doing and the realism, the authenticity, right? So when we talk about the terminalistic ballistics or the temporary cavities, and how the bullets upon impact, depending upon the round you're using, how much they expand and wound, that's like a big deal. And when we share that with them, they kind of, can be quite impressed with that. So yeah, Creator Range Day was great. We met some top creators there that we've seen before, like Nice Guy and Clean and Drewski. I've seen Clean and Nice Guy in person, but this was the first time seeing Drewski. That was cool. Among other creators too, Sheriff Eli and some other great guys and gals. But yeah, that's it's kind of it was really awesome. I mean, shooting oh my goodness, the Scar 5. See, this is not my expertise, but it was incredible shooting the Vector. And minigun and so on and so forth. Like it's quite the rush, and you love seeing the guys that created these weapons, these tools, or just quite frankly are experts, and there's a lot of respect for what they do, and them talking about all the different the tech there was pretty awesome.
Sub has a fairly large collection, I'm told, and shoots a lot. So that's pretty cool.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
But I think it's one of the things that I think is really great about this game is how, your attention to detail, I will say this, on the guns and the customizations and how they attach to each other.
Yep.
Because you're right. You mentioned, you have to have, you have a rise, you have a mount for an optic, right? Like a lot of time, it's like
Yes.
in games like Call of Duty where it's like, oh, I want to have a scope, and you just select the scope on the optic list and it just appears.
Yeah,
right?
but you need the mount, and you obviously to put the, like, for example, like I said, the scope on the ACOG, and or even like for a minute, honestly, when I'm learning the game, I'm like, wait, wow, why the hell can I put the suppressor on? You got to take off the muzzle, of the the M4, and then I had to put on the new attachment with a flash, or and then I had, just I forgot what the sounds was, but then or the suppressor, but like it's really a big deal, especially because we have even ex-SOF guys that did the in-game animations. We're not like paying for assets here. They're in-game animations that are authentic. Corey Devil Dog Gamer, another reason why we wanted to bring him in is because he's a former Marine. So, I personally am not a weapons and combat expert, but we have people on the team that's a very big priority and focus. I did an interview with Dr. Sean McFate. This guy helped give us the inspiration for Gray Zone Warfare. Gray Zone Warfare blurs the line between war and peace, and a lot of it today is digital. It's not a futuristic thing. It's happening now. Like the way China will actually influence us with tech and apps and try to get people fighting over politics, and it's actually promoted by them. Gray Zone Warfare, there's a lot of conspiracy that is actually happening to get people to pick certain sides to vote. Excuse me, I could go on all day. Probably don't want to talk about that part, but you know what I love? You know what I love about our studio and about the audience we have is people are not worried about offending each other. And I love our community. People talk to each other. They're willing to talk more about these things without going crazy on one another. And the politics goes away. And it's like people can just come together and play a damn good game and have fun. That's what video games is about, gentlemen. And if people can't understand that, do something else. Don't really care. Don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting, so you mentioned that and you kind of tie, the factions, right? So when the game first dropped, it was interesting on Twitter because you'd have people that would pick factions, right? Because, I don't know if this is still true, but you can't pair up with people from different factions, right? Like, so if you wanted to make a party, you have to all be the same faction.
Yeah, so in order to hop in the game, you have to squad up, right? So you can go into the menu, you squad up, and then you go and you select, launch to go into the lobby or to go into the server. So
right,
yeah. So who knows, in the future how we work it out? Like, because there's, I'll tell you this, eventually, and this is down the road, but eventually we do want to have like custom servers, right? And where you can tailor it to your needs and such. And we are working on some things that we want to get to the point where it is more flexible. But for right now, yeah, you have your 16 players in the faction, but you can squad up with 4 and go out there and get them.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because when the game first came out, we were we were looking at it, and there was a question. Mithras was a popular faction in the circles that I move in.
Yes,
and so a lot of people were choosing Mithras, and they were not. And there was a lot of like, oh, you signed up and you picked some other faction, right? And I know you guys put that in pretty early that you could wipe your character and start over because some people would just sign up at the game and they weren't doing the research of like who their friends, who's picking what. And it was kind of like back in the day, right? Oh, I bought a Sony and somebody else is like, well, I'm on Xbox or whatever. And it's like, well, then you're screwed, right? Like, you can't play together.
Yep.
And so it was kind of like that whole mentality. And so it's interesting to, it was interesting to see the conversations about, well, this is the better, this is the better faction. And the reality is, why is it the better faction? Well, because I'm in it. Right.
So, yeah. And, right now it's like, it's very vanilla, like there's not much of a difference. We talk about a little bit about the lore, about LRI and some billion-dollar guy, you can read between the lines who with the PMCs and with the money and tech. And then you have another, Mithras that more like the Spartan mentality, and they share the loot and they share everything together. Like, so some people will pick it based on that or based on the location of where the fob is at, the base. In the future, we will have more distinctions, and reasons to choose the other factions. But right now, again, we really are focused on the gameplay. But we are thinking about, and we're not sure how to work it in yet, that if it's unbalanced, we're thinking about maybe an incentive to go to another faction.
Maybe a way to defect, maybe.
Yeah,
so you defect, some sort of mechanic would be interesting.
We can see the numbers, the servers, so we can see, okay, we need to kind of get some guys over another faction. So we'll see what we can do.
Pojo Boy says his buddy didn't want to play for the Fei Long faction because they were owned by a billionaire.
Oh, LRI. Yeah, well, there you go.
That's hilarious.
There you go.
That's great.
There you go.
And I think it's fun when games can have this sort of play in them that choices do, your choices have some consequences, right? Like Call of Duty, your choices don't really have consequences. You die and you start over.
Not even in the BR.
You start the game again, right? And yeah, it's like, especially since every game, it's a start over, right? This is interesting because you had to, and this was something that I ran into, is I had to make a choice, right? Early on, who do I want to play with? That was the question. It wasn't a question of what faction do I want to be in. It's like, who do I want to play with and who's in what faction? And Mithras happened to be the popular one at the time. And so, it made that choice easy. But it was interesting. And I did have to tell a couple of people that like, I can't play with you. Like, you didn't pick the right faction. You're the other guys. And so, it kind of made the game fun to start, from the beginning, is really have to ask around, like, who am I going to be? Who am I going to play with? Who's my squad? And then I look at like, I kind of look at the directions that goes. And I think it's a fascinating way to start, right? It's not like, oh, today I want to play with these guys and tomorrow I want to play with those guys. It's like, oh, I can't play with those guys. I might hunt them if the opportunity arises.
If the opportunity arises. And that's the whole thing, right? So again, we're taking ideas, we're making some our own, we're inspired by others, we're inspired by DayZ, we're inspired by Gra or Ghost Recon, we're inspired by Tarkov. Every developer is inspired by games, meaning like, you take, Zelda, even Dark Souls had Zelda and inspirations from Zelda. You know what I mean? Like all these games, we were inspired by Dark Souls, where you get the chance to get your body one time and then you die and it's gone, right? Same thing with Dark Souls. Get one chance to get, your collect your souls back. But anyway, it's a great game to hop into where you can take your time and you can learn and try and play it as your own experience. If you're trying though to hop in and want it to be like Tarkov, you're going to be disappointed because you're not going in and immediately getting into PvP. It could be hours before you see another player. More like sometimes like a DayZ and the unpredictability, right? And then also understand that, hey, look, you go out there, you do tests, you work together with some pals, you get to talk with people and just learn the game. I really think that's where, if the more we get the word out there and you get the audience where they just don't want to feel like they have to be super competitive, they don't want to get into where they feel like they're going to be spawn killed if everyone knows all the spawn points, and they don't want to feel like they're not going to be able to have a chance to get the better gear. This is a game for you. Obviously, I'm trying to sell the game right now, but it really is a game. Because look, guys, if I can go in at my age and play it and learn it and almost get there and beat it, and I did most of it on my own, anybody can hop in and play it. And I think for those who are looking for a balance to find instead of fast pace, a slow pace, this is your game, an open world. We're the only ones that are doing it. Open world.
Well, and the amount that I played, one of the things that I noticed and I appreciate the most is actually the community. There were a couple times, like you mentioned earlier, being out in the field where we'd have randos that would help us finish tasks and things like that. Inside the base, you're dropping, you were able to drop things for people to help them, like a suppressor or
there
whatever.
Was that bucket of people that would throwing extra
guys,
gear
how
in a
about the
bucket
donation
for a
box
while.
that we made because of the community?
Yeah, that's awesome. Just very helpful, man. I mean, like, just really overall, it was a positive experience. I bought that game mainly to play with a specific person who happens to work 72 hours a day, so we don't get to really play that much. But it's I'm gonna be playing it again.
Yeah,
awesome. Sounds good to me.
So So I don't know about Jay, but I've got like a wish list of a few things that I was thinking of that I think adding to it would be fun, slash kind of accessible because again the game is is very realistic, but it's also like more accessible than like Tarkov, which I think is a huge plus. But like I would love to have like some sort of base customization, something where it's like there's a tent that's mine, right? Like when I load in.
Well, crafting and such, yeah. That'll also make the roadmap too. So that's coming too.
That's great because it's like I've played a number of games where it's like you have like a base and it's like you add stuff and it's like, and that's something that I would love to see some MTX on, where it's like I want to have a poster on my wall, or I want to have like a trophy or something. That's interesting. That just makes it more engaging, because I feel like you go to the base and there's just there's not a lot there, right?
No, and
there's a lot of spaces, and
yep.
and they don't do anything, right?
Of course. Then there's more plans for that as well, with the customization to your fob or hideout or something of the sort that we've briefly touched on before.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where, like, again, I could talk about it tooth and nail, but it is better to start showing you guys. And we have some ways to go to get to crafting as we have laid out the roadmap. But who knows if we ever mix and match some things in the roadmap? There's a lot that's coming, guys. So we definitely know that crafting also helps with the loop. You feel like you have more to play for. You have more that's personal. You want your own guy to have reasons to play and make things unique. And this is what's coming in the future to Gray Zone Warfare, and it's a long road ahead, but we're getting there.
Nice. Controller support, obviously, we talked about that. It's on its way. Or like, and especially like a hybrid of it, right? So like, on PC, if I'm playing on controller, the ability to use the keyboard to do stuff is, Call of Duty has that now, which they didn't for a long time. It was either one or the other. But, the hybrid mode is really handy in a lot of ways. There, it would be nice. I would love to see a bigger hit area on actions. So like opening doors or turning on switches. A lot of times it's a lot of like, where is there? All right.
Bigger detection area, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't know how they phrase it.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like, also true. Sometimes it's difficult if you're trying to revive someone. It's very sensitive. When you have someone who's bleeding out, going into a coma, and you have to be really careful where you're looking. Those are sort of some things that can certainly get a little better for sure. The idea of the door is like looking down, but boxes, it's understandable. There's a lot of little things we can improve upon. Certainly.
Yeah. I think a centering dot, a point of reference of like where you're actually looking in the same vein would be helpful. But I do understand that that's a realism point. To kind of have that or not have that. And then when console launches, some form of crossplay would be be fun, because I know I have a lot of guys, I have a lot of people that that I play with that are only console. They don't play on PC. And they're interested in the game and they want to play, but it's kind of like, if I'm on my PC, I mean, look, I'm in a fortunate position where I have both. I can shut off the PC and I can turn on my Xbox and I can play with them. Play on that mode when I want to, but I also have spent an ungodly amount of money on a PC, and I like to play on that because I like all the things that come with playing on PC. Yep. And so it's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like the ideal world would be to have a way to balance both at the same time.
Yep.
And so that's kind of like, having time. And that's kind of like my wish list of like, outside of everything that's been published, of like, I would love to see this stuff going forward. I don't know if Jay, you have a wish list.
No, I mean, like, just those things. And like I said, I don't want to pretend that I was a Gray Zone main in any way. I put 40 hours into it. And you guys fixed my biggest issue was the helicopter thing. Like, that was crazy. But I mean, just, being able to visit with you and just share the observations of, like I said, having 40 plus hours into the game at an early stage is, has been really, really awesome, man. It's been great getting to hang out with you.
Likewise, gentlemen.
Yeah. I've been having a great time as well. So, we're pushing time a little bit here. So I don't know if there's any, anything you want to add, if you want to throw more pitch in for anybody on the fence of trying Gray Zone.
I think the best thing to do is just follow us on Steam. Gray Zone Warfare, simple search, because then you can get all the updates. It's the best way to keep track, or Gray Zone Warfare on Twitter. But I would say, follow us on Steam. You'll find the links to our Discord and all that. And we'll have more updates to talk about. We have a big patch on the way. And again, I can't stress it enough. If you're trying to work your way into extraction shooter and don't want to feel the pressure of just constant PvP, want to work your way in, Gray Zone Warfare is a game. You jump in, you don't have to worry about a time limit. Play as long as you want, exit when you want, and you still get the healthy, strategical, slow, methodical approach where you can think things out, take your time. It's a good game to jump into.
Fantastic. Well, Rick, it's been great having you. We're going to wrap up. I am going to put links to Gray Zone, Steam, socials, all of that. If you have a package of links you'd like me to include, send them over to my DM. And so when the episode airs, we will include all that. Thank you for your time. We really loved having you. It was a great conversation. Next week, we have Alex from Warzone Loadout on. So that, if you're here for here for us normally, tune in next week. We got another great guest. We have a lot of guests coming up. This year starting out with a bang. No slow start this year for us. So we're just slamming through. But Gray Zone, I highly recommend it. I had a great time with it. Jay, I know you've had you've enjoyed it as well. Seal of approval, yeah, great. And so but thanks again, and we're gonna catch everybody on the next one. Rick, don't forget, stick around just for a few minutes after we end up.